across the sea of life, so much pain, warring divides. It's a shame we don't see how it can be. Oh, we need to smile at each other.
Assalamu alaikum, may peace be upon you.
All we need is love. All we need to honor our mother, shelter our sisters, alter existence. God's help will come from above. But first we need the love.
Welcome back to another week of the Yfactor. Today is Thursday the 19th of May, and guess what, listeners? We finally found our missing co-host.
Yeah, I was thankfully released by the University Assessments hostage team.
I'll bet the rest of us, inshallah.
Inshallah. It was a period of procrastination for me, but I'm back.
And hopefully for good.
Yeah, inshallah. That's if they don't come back for me in a few weeks' time.
Inshallah. With that, we'll go on to our news segment for today.
The Yfactor.
Our first story this week will be an update on the situation in Syria. Now, the latest to come out of the country is reports that there was apparently one mass grave in the southern city of Deraa. Apparently, there were like 20 bodies found in there and they've been exhumed. And there are reports that there are many other of those mass graves in the area. Yeah,
I think they said there was 41 other corpses that were found in fields that were like in the surrounding suburbs or the nearby towns.
Terrible. But the problem is that since, as we told you guys in the previous weeks, foreign journalists are not actually allowed to enter Syria, so most of the newspapers reporting these things aren't able to sort of like verify them. They're just saying that these are reports coming out of Syria, but their own journalists can't really confirm that any of it is true.
Yeah, and the US has also staked its claim in this issue as well. Hillary Clinton, she blames Syria for the ongoing violence, and they're going to look into it anyway. So hopefully let's just get some foreign journalists in there to verify some of these details, because it is pretty daunting. I mean, if they're saying that there's 20 bodies and 41 other bodies around the area, and this is all going under the radar, it's pretty sad.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's besides the death tolls that we already hear about on a daily basis. And, I mean, Hillary Clinton's now saying that they'll be taking additional steps in the days ahead, but what that means, we're not really sure, so keep an eye out for news from Syria.
Well, speaking of Hillary Clinton, a Orthodox Jewish newspaper has apologized for deleting her photo in that infamous photo where the Obama administration are watching the Navy SEALs operation on Osama bin Laden.
The weekly Der Zeitung apparently doesn't actually publish images of women, something to do with Orthodox Jewish beliefs, but it was quite an interesting debacle, so they ended up having to apologise after causing offence for that.
Oh, they always have to apologise to the US because they're immune to criticism. Well, I better watch my comments.
Apparently, the photo editor didn't read the fine print that accompanied the White House photo. Apparently, when you get a photo from the White House, it says that you're not allowed to make any changes at all.
If only that rule applied elsewhere.
The Yfactor.
Speaking of the US, two imams from Memphis in the States, Masuda Rahman and Mohamed Zaghloul, is that how you pronounce it, Miran?
It's Zaghloul, actually, but...
Thank you, Al Jazeera. Anyway, they boarded the flight on Friday morning, and after being screened twice at the airport, the flight was just about to take off, and they were told that, the flight was stopped.
Yeah, apparently the pilot actually on the runway sort of turned around and then got the guy to get screened a third time and then refused to let him board the plane again.
That's interesting. Well, their initial intention was to attend a conference which was addressing prejudice against Muslims. So if they were screened twice and found to have no explosives whatsoever, I do not see any reason why or how any flight can justify their actions.
It was actually really interesting because the agents at the gates asked the passengers if they felt uncomfortable about having the two imams on the flight, and they said that they didn't have any problems at all. So nobody was really concerned about them apart from the pilot, who insisted on having them taken off. And I think the most ironic thing at all is, like you mentioned, the fact that they were going to a conference to address prejudice against Muslims.
Well, it said they did eventually get to Charlotte, which was their destination, and they met up with their lawyer. So look forward to a lawsuit coming up soon.
The Yfactor.
Now, speaking of flights, and also in the US, a woman was told she was too fat to fly under Southwest Airlines' controversial weight restriction policy. She's been apologised to by the airline and offered free flight vouchers, but, I mean, the story itself is just so far-fetched.
Yeah, definitely. Apparently she was naturally be very humiliated in that incident, and it took him about 45 minutes to really thrash out the issues about her weight, which is also another embarrassing scenario to be in.
I think the interesting thing was that when she actually asked the personnel what the weight restriction was, the guy said to her he didn't know, he just knew that she was too heavy to fly, too fat to fly, basically, in her own words.
Look, the solution lies in our dear old wise man, Homer Simpson. When he was about to take a flight, he bought 2 tickets for both his gluteus maximuses.
Wise words indeed.
Yes.
The Yfactor.
And as you know, on the Yfactor, we have all the latest breaking news. Now, this scientific news shows that blood tests have actually been developed that can tell you how long you're going to live.
The controversial procedure could actually be available to all of us for about $670 from as early as next year, inshallah.
But there are also major implications for life insurance policies or medical cover.
Of course, but then there's also the whole idea of all the quacks that will come up, you know, people who try and sell you snake oil or any anti-aging kind of remedy, because when you find out, you know, how long you have to live, you might want to try and prevent that or something.
Maybe if these scientists stop trying to play God and actually do what they're meant to do, we might get far in life, Miran, don't you think?
Yes, but speaking of scientists who play God, I mean, did you see what Stephen Hawking said yesterday?
That was interesting. We all know Stephen Hawking's a renowned scientist who's actually paralysed. He's in a wheelchair. He said that he doesn't believe in heaven. He thinks it's a fairy tale, and he also said that our brains are apparently computers that will stop working one day.
Now, Stephen Hawking actually has a motor neuron disease, and if you've seen photos of him, he sort of speaks into this, like, whistle kind of looking microphone, and that's how he writes his books and does everything, really. Apparently he says he's not afraid to die because, well, that's all that's going to happen. His brain's just the computer that's going to shut down, like you said.
If our brains are computers, I think we need a lot more IT individuals out there to take care of our brains,
especially around this time of the year.
Definitely.
The Yfactor.
And in the Australian Federation of Islamic Councils, or AFIC, which is pretty much the nation's peak Muslim group, has approached the Gillard government. Now, what they want to do is introduce Sharia law, and it's not the scariest Sharia law you hear about in the media.
They call it a more moderate variety of Islamic law, and basically, from what we understand, they're sort of seeking to get things like, you know, divorce laws and marriage laws under Islamic law recognised, sort of on the model of what happens in Britain. Right, Mohammed?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, in Britain they have a similar model, and it's working really well for them, where a sheikh can arbitrate whether there's a domestic dispute between an Islamic couple, and it works fine in Britain. And I mean, in all honesty, it's a good way to slowly get Australians used to the fact that Sharia law is actually divine law, as we Muslims believe.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in the submission, AFIC makes it very, very clear that people who criticise Sharia as being biased against women and, you know, like treats women as second-class citizens, that's all wrong. They're pushing a very moderate line of thought and trying to clarify the misconceptions in their application to the Gillard government. They say that Muslims in Australia should accept the Australian values, but at the same time, Australia should provide a public sphere for Muslims to practice their belief.
I think that's a fair argument. I mean, and the good thing is, Miran, we know Australia adopts a lot of its policies from Britain, right? And since 1996, Britain's allowed for this dispute resolution through a Sharia tribunal. So, if it's working well in Britain, I think the Australian government would be more receptive to possibly trialing it out and maybe in a few years implementing it, inshallah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good step in the right direction. And I mean, there's a lot of parallels or comparisons to Jewish traditions in the articles that discuss this issue. And I do believe that the Jews have a lobby group or something that actually handles that sort of thing in Australia. Like if they had to apply their own faith laws to civil matters like marriage and divorce and whatnot, they have their ways of going about it. And so I think it's only fair to extend extend that to Muslims.
Yeah.
I'm not very clear on the whole Jewish thing, so I'm not going to talk like I'm an expert on that, but I'm just saying that these sorts of things, they don't get in the way of Australian law, but they accommodate for everyone, and it sort of really increases the feeling of multiculturalism, which I think really needs to return to Australia.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like the Australian government, they're actively involved in two main Islamic areas, which is halal food, as we all know, and Islamic finance, because they see the benefit in that. So slowly but surely they're adopting, they're more receptive to Islamic policies and Sharia law. So inshallah, this is a step in the right direction.
Inshallah.
The Yfactor.
And that's an end to our serious news for the week. Now for the wacky stories. Mohammed, the first one.
Well, an Israeli couple, and we all know we love our Facebook, don't deny it out there. Anyway, an Israeli couple has taken their love to a new degree and named their child after the Facebook app.
Facebook button, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. It's really interesting that they really wanted an original name that no one had before. So the father, Lio Adler, says that he named her because it's modern and innovative.
Yeah, modern and bid'ah.
Bid'ah. Do they have bid'ah in Judaism?
Should be a bid'ah button, don't you think?
Interesting. Well, I mean, that just gives rise to so many other possibilities, Mohammed. But, firstly, let's just say that, in their opinion, this name is the modern equivalent of the name Ahava, which is love in Hebrew. So he's saying it's just his way of saying to his daughter, love.
Fantastic. Other names include Poke, Tag, Unfriend, and Filter. So check out those names on muslimnames.com.
Anybody who's stuck for an original name these days, Facebook has plenty to give.
The Yfactor.
Mohammed, you want to take the next story?
I'm sorry, I honestly do not believe this next story, so you can inform our listeners.
Well, Mohammed, I do understand where your doubt is coming from, because, listeners, our second story is about Zombie Awareness Month. Yes, it's actually something real. It happens every May. And it's something organised by the Zombie Research Society. Now, apparently they've chosen this time of the year because many films important to the evolution of the modern zombie are actually set in May. Some of those movies include Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead.
And, oh my goodness, I still don't believe this. And the justification is the month of spring, right? And naturally brings with it a sense of renewal and hopefulness. And they say May is a perfect month to emphasize continued vigilance in the face of the coming zombie pandemic.
Zombie pandemic, drum rolls.
Well, khair inshallah.
They actually wear grey ribbons to signify the undead shadows that lurk behind our modern light of day. So this happens between May 1st and May 31. So we're in the middle of that, guys, and if you want to help the Zombie Research Society members and friends take this small step to acknowledge the coming danger of the zombie pandemic.
No, don't help them. Lobby against them. What's wrong with you? What's next? A Vampire Research Society?
I think that something like that probably already exists. With Twilight and Vampire Diaries and stuff.
Good, inshallah. We live in a very colourful world, don't we, Miran?
Definitely.
The Yfactor.
There's been an explosion in Auburn recently after a stabbing and a drive-by shooting, which has led to 3 arrests, 2 dead, and 4 critically injured in hospital. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually a positive story about Auburn, isn't it, Miran?
I'm still finding it very difficult that there is such a thing. But apparently,
I thought it was an oxymoron when I first read it, but
yeah. And you actually like Auburn, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I actually live there, so...
All right. Well, apparently, according to a new national study, Auburn is one of the best places in Australia for a woman to find a male partner because there's a ratio of 2.1 single men for every single woman in Auburn.
Well, Auburn is the refugee capital of the country, so...
It's also the unemployed hub of the country.
Khair inshallah. But look, it's good for you ladies out there, all the Muslim sisters, if, instead of having a selection of one bum, you've got 2 bums to choose from.
Well, apparently the editor, Felicity Harley, said that it was important for women to consider their personal health and happiness, which would include a venture down to Auburn to find Mr. Right.
And if you do head down to Auburn, just head for Centrelink. You'll find plenty of men down there.
The Yfactor.
This brings us to the end of our quirky news segment for this episode.
Stick around after the break. Our feature this week will be about Palestine on occasion of the Nakba.
So stay tuned. You're listening to the Yfactor on 87.6 FM.